Many times the victim becomes the victimizer. Many times those who were victims of some great evil eventually abuse and murder others. Why do they do this? We really do not know. They say it may be some sort of psychological condition. I call it evil. That's what I call this type of thing. I just say it's evil. I don't need to try to fully comprehend it. I don't need some psychiatrist to explain it to me. It's just evil. And we talk about how, the United States needs to do the right thing. And there are many voices out there that are on the right. There are many voices out there that talk about the evils of the United States. And in looking into the evils of the United States, we find people who were once victims being the victimizer. For example, Madelein Albright. She was a child during the Holocaust. When her and her family were seeking refuge from the terror of the Nazis, it was a Serbian family that gave refuge, that gave protection to Madelein Albright and her family. And it was Madelein Albright who pushed for the bombing of the Serbs. It was Madelein Albright who was a part of the very political system, the very political network that backed and armed and supported Albanian fascist terrorists. And it was Madelein Albright who was proud about the fact that the United States murdered 500,000 Iraqi children. I'm reading this book. It's called Kosovo Crisis by Vojin Joksimovic. Let me see if the camera picks this up. I don't want you guys to miss this because this has been a great read. I've been reading this. And I will say, this Serbian writer, he's got that typical Slavic style when he writes. It's just straightforward, simple, black and white. This is evil, this is wrong, this is good, this is righteous. It's just very, very straightforward. It's direct. I love it. It just confronts the reality. It presents the reality. It reminds me very much, his style reminds me very much of the style of the guy who wrote the book on Poland's Holocaust, Petrovsky. I think his name, Tadeusz Petrovsky. Tadeusz Petrovsky. He is a Polish writer. He wrote. I'm getting my words mixed up here. He wrote a great book, an excellent read called Poland's Holocaust. If you are interested in the subject of the Holocaust and how Poland suffered tremendously under the Third Reich and also under the evils of the atheistic terror of the Bolsheviks, I would highly recommend reading that book, Poland's Holocaust. So looking at this book, Kosovo Crisis, there is a part here about Madelein Albright, and I find this to be very disturbing. How Madelein Albright was proud about the fact that she was responsible for killing 500,000 Iraqi kids. In a Washington Times article on April 29th, 1999, by William Dorich, he wrote, in a recent interview on 60 Minutes, Leslie Stahl asked Madelein Albright, quote, I understand that 500,000 Iraqi children have died due to our sanctions. Was it worth it? Albright replied, it was worth it. So here's a woman who was a victim of the Holocaust. She passed away last month. And she was a victim of the Holocaust. And her family was given refuge by Serbs. She ended up turning against the Serbs. And she ended up being proud about killing 500,000 kids. Many times, the victim becomes the victimizer. This is the problem. You'll hear stories about how you have kids who were abused by their fathers in some way, and then they become abusers when they get older. We hear about this sort of thing. Why does this happen? And I'm not here to make an excuse because there is no excuse. I call it evil. You begin to replicate your abuser. It's like your abuser puts his fingerprints on you, and you become the abuser. You begin to replicate the abuser. You begin to emulate the abuser in a way. And many people get abused and they don't become abusers. So it's not like this automatic thing like, oh, if somebody is abused, then they'll become an abuser. No, people choose to become abusers. Why does this happen? I really don't know. I cannot fathom it. I can't fully comprehend this. I can't. Maybe it's because, here's my attempt to explain it. Maybe it's because they hated the feeling of powerlessness so much that they want to become powerful, and to them power is being like their abuser, and so they become like their abuser because they like that feeling of power as opposed to the feeling of powerlessness that they were once in. Maybe that's an explanation. I don't know. It's still evil nonetheless. But I've seen numerous examples of this. For example, Joseph Lieberman, American Jewish politician. He supported the KLA. He was amongst the first politicians to support the backing of the KLA, the Kosovo Liberation Army, which literally were Albanian Nazis. The KLA were Albanian Nazis. And after America bombed the Serbs, they gave the power over Kosovo to the KLA. And the Americans, NATO as a whole, allowed the KLA to take over cities in Kosovo. And when they took over cities, they tormented and they terrorized the Serbian populations and the Gypsy populations, or the Romani populations. And many Gypsies and Serbs fled Kosovo, and they went to Serbia or they went elsewhere. And here were the Nazis at work. Haven't we all heard about how the Nazis killed Gypsies? Less of us have heard about how the Nazis killed Serbs, but they definitely did. They killed around 1 million Serbs, thanks to their Croatian proxies. And here we have in the 1990s the same damn thing. We have Albanian Nazis supporting or terrorizing, with the support of NATO, the Serbian and Gypsy populations. These were Nazis in the 1990s. And who supported arming and backing them? It was Joseph Lieberman. It was William Cohen. It was Madelein Albright. And they're all Jewish. These were all Jewish American politicians. And why do we have Jewish people supporting Nazis? That's the craziest thing ever. And we see the same sort of thing happening today with Ukraine, with the backing of the Azov. We have Zelensky, he's the Jewish president of Ukraine. We have Zelensky wearing the symbol of the OUN, the Organization of Ukrainian Nationalists, who were literally Nazi collaborators who murdered hundreds of thousands of people. And they took part in the massive slaughter of tens of thousands of ethnic Poles. They were Nazi collaborators, and now the OUN is considered to be a heroic organization today by Ukraine's nationalists, of which they are many. And you have Zelensky wearing their symbol. You have Zelensky's government giving an award to a Nazi, a Ukrainian nationalist war criminal, Mr. Simcic, and this guy wiped out a whole Polish village. He wiped out a whole Polish village, and he told his men, if you show mercy to these Poles, I will kill you myself. And he is considered a hero in Ukraine today. We have streets in Ukraine named after Bandera. We have monuments and architecture named after people like Roman Shukovich, and what's the other one's name? Andrei Melnik. These heroes, they were all murderers. They were Nazi collaborators. It's amazing. For years, we've been hearing about the evils of Nazism, but we have this sort of thing happening. Now, let's talk about the horrors of the sanctions that were imposed upon Serbia in the 1990s. Mr. Joksimovic talks about this, and he talks about how so many Serbs were dying because they were deprived of the medical attention and medicine that they needed so desperately because of the sanctions. And it says here, the people were dying due to lack of antibiotics, anesthetics, and insulin. In Belgrade, the Serbs were digging up their dead to retrieve pacemakers. Over 150,000 Serbian diabetics went without insulin and many died. Over 170,000 cancer patients had no medicine and no treatment for the past 3 years, and those who died did so without pain-killing drugs. And this is a quote from an article. What I just read to you guys is actually a quote from an article, or really a book, actually, by William Dorich, which was published in 1994, and it's called The Suppressed Serbian Voice and the Free Press in America. And the book goes on to say, preventable diseases caused more than 70% of deaths among children. Malnutrition was widespread. According to relief agencies, food supplies in Serbia and Montenegro were only 56% of what was required. Another Belgrade doctor who wished to remain anonymous stated, quote, I don't know who the sanctions are for, if these sanctions are for children, for cardiac patients, for psychiatric patients, for dialysis and cancer patients, then these sanctions are successful. So, this is what the Americans did to Iraq, leading to the deaths of hundreds of thousands of children, and this is what they did to Serbia. And Madelein Albright was totally proud of this. Totally proud of having blood on her hands. So, here we have a case of someone who was once a victim becoming the victimizer. Someone who was under a reign of terror, supporting the successors of that reign of terror. I'm speaking of the Albanian fascist gangs, the KLA, which brought a reign of terror in Kosovo against the Serbian and Gypsy populations. The victim becomes the victimizer in these horrid situations.
Просила тебя, помоги, но вместо капель дождя ты пролил керосин. Солнце вяло стекает вниз, скоро первый трамвай, время тает, тает. Ты скажешь, что это каприз, но что-то внутри никто не узнает. Под покровом ночи скрой то, что болит. Слезы в моей крови. Под покровом